Welcome, friend, to a quiet reflection on one of history's strangest ironies, a time when humanity's proudest triumph became its most devastating curse. Tonight, we return to Victorian London, a city that sought to cleanse itself of disease and filth, only to drown in its own idea of progress. Imagine the 19th century, gas lamps flickering through fog-laden streets, horses clattering over cobblestones, and the mighty Thames flowing through the heart of an empire that ruled the world. But beneath this spectacle of advancement lay an unseen terror, a silent, invisible poison spreading through the veins of the city itself. This is not a tale of ignorance or neglect. It is a story of how progress, pursued without understanding, can become a weapon against the very people it promises to save. How an entire civilization, convinced it had conquered disease, engineered instead its own quiet destruction. The year was 1858, the height of what Victorians proudly called the Great Awakening of urban civilization. The Thames sparkled with a newfound clarity. The narrow, filthy lanes of old London were vanishing, replaced by broad boulevards and shining drains. New sewage systems, a marvel of modern engineering, promised to wash away centuries of squalor. Queen Victoria herself had declared that London would stand as the jewel of the modern world, proof that British science could banish pestilence forever. Newspapers hailed the engineers as saviors, men who had finally outwitted nature. But under this immaculate facade, something dreadful was brewing. The very systems built to save lives were turning homes into silent chambers of sickness. The pipes that gleamed with promise would soon hum with the whispers of decay. Among the first to sense the truth was Dr. Edmund Whitmore, a respected physician in the affluent district of Kensington. At first, Whitmore celebrated the reforms as any rational man of science would. The unbearable stench of the old cesspits had vanished. Streets were cleaner. His patients were happier, healthier, or so it seemed. Then the pattern began to emerge. Children once lively and robust began to fade, not with fevers or infections, but with a slow, unexplainable exhaustion. Adults complained of clouded thoughts, sudden confusion, and an eerie forgetfulness that defied all medical reason. Dr. Whitmore's notes filled with symptoms that fit no known disease. Persistent fatigue that stole the life from his patients. Digestive troubles that came and went like ghosts. And a subtle madness, minds unraveling in quiet, terrifying ways. He had no answers. Only the growing dread that something within the city itself was poisoning its people. In the autumn of that year, a woman named Sarah Mitchell became the embodiment of this mysterious affliction. Known in her neighborhood as energetic and cheerful, Sarah managed her home and 4 children with tireless grace. But after the installation of the new sewage lines beneath her home, her vitality began to crumble. At first, she misplaced small things, names, recipes, the rhythm of her daily routine. Then, confusion deepened into something darker. She would start cooking and forget why she was in the kitchen. She'd stare at familiar faces as though they were strangers. Her husband, Thomas, blamed the stress of adapting to modern conveniences. But when Sarah began suffering violent headaches and relentless coughing, fear replaced reason. Dr. Whitmore examined her, and found nothing. Her pulse was strong, her lungs clear, her body free of infection. And yet, Sarah Mitchell was dying before his eyes, her mind unraveling, her strength vanishing day by day. Whitmore's unease hardened into alarm as more cases emerged, all from neighborhoods newly connected to the revolutionary sewage system. Across London, in the grand mansion of the Ashford family in Bloomsbury, the same story unfolded in a different guise. Their governess, Margaret Thompson, well-educated and meticulous, had begun showing the same strange decline. She lost her clarity of thought. Lessons turned incoherent, her once disciplined mind wandered into fog. At first, Mrs. Ashford scolded her, assuming distraction or romance had made her careless. But when Margaret developed the same persistent cough, the same exhaustion, even the same faint tremor in her hands, it became impossible to deny, this was not coincidence. The Ashfords summoned their physician, Dr. Harrison Blackwood, one of London's most respected doctors. He too was baffled. No trace of tuberculosis, no malnutrition, no infection, only a slow, systematic collapse of the body and mind. Soon, other wealthy homes reported identical cases. Servants, children, even household pets showed signs of strange ailments that no medicine could cure. And in every case, one thing was constant: the house was connected to the new sewage lines. To question the sanitation system was to challenge the crown jewel of British progress. Billions of pounds, decades of labor, and the pride of an empire had been invested in it. To admit it was causing harm would mean confessing that the greatest public health triumph of the century was, in fact, a catastrophe. And so the medical establishment looked away. Reports were buried. Whispers were silenced. London's doctors continued to prescribe tonics and rest, while the true cause of death flowed quietly beneath their feet. In the poorer districts, where the new systems had been installed in crowded tenements, the symptoms spread like wildfire. Dr. James Morrison, who served London's working-class families, began to notice the same inexplicable patterns. Those who had once lived in filth but survived with stubborn resilience were now wasting away in spotless, sanitized homes. Men who had labored for decades in the docks found their strength ebbing away. Children grew listless and hollow-eyed. Women who had endured poverty with fierce energy now sank into confusion and despair. The sickness did not discriminate by wealth or birth. The poor in their tenements, the rich in their drawing rooms, all were breathing the same poisoned air. Among them was William Henderson, a dock worker renowned for his strength and endurance. He had hauled cargo along the Thames for 15 years, his name synonymous with reliability. But within months of his building's new sewage installation, his body began to betray him. At first, his hands trembled. Then his memory faltered. He forgot routes he had walked for years. He would stand mid-shift, tools slipping from his grasp, unable to recall what he was meant to do. At home, his wife Ellen watched helplessly as her husband, once unshakable, drifted into confusion. He would begin simple repairs and forget halfway through. He'd hold a hammer and stare, uncomprehending, at the nails in his hand. In their building, families whispered of a curse. But the truth was far more terrible, and far more human. The problem, though unknown at the time, lay within the design of the new sanitation systems themselves. The iron pipes, poorly sealed and improperly vented, allowed toxic sewer gases, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, to seep back into homes. Invisible and odorless, these gases slowly poisoned the residents, attacking their nervous systems and dulling their minds. The very air they believed purified was slowly killing them. And by the time the truth began to surface, thousands were already beyond saving. By the end of the 19th century, London's mortality rates had quietly climbed even as the city proclaimed itself the cleanest in the world. Medical journals would later admit, in cautious language, that certain unforeseen effects had accompanied the sanitation revolution. But the full scope of the tragedy, the generations of lives diminished, minds clouded, families broken, would never be officially acknowledged. By 1860, rumors of strange illnesses had begun to echo through London's medical circles. But official reports dismissed them as isolated coincidences, the natural price of rapid modernization. Engineers defended their designs, politicians defended their reputations, and the newspapers, loyal to their advertisers and the empire's pride, turned a blind eye. Behind the polished veneer of progress, physicians like Dr. Whitmore, Dr. Blackwood, and Dr. Morrison exchanged quiet letters, comparing notes in secret. They spoke of families collapsing into madness, of neighborhoods where people moved in healthy and moved out hollow-eyed. Some began to suspect the new plumbing itself, though few dared to say it aloud. For to question the sanitation reform was to question the foundations of modern science, the very ideology of progress that defined Victorian identity. And in a city ruled by appearances, image mattered more than truth. The paradox was almost poetic. As London streets grew cleaner, its people grew sicker. The smell of filth was gone, but the odorless poison that replaced it was far more deadly. The absence of stench was taken as proof that all was well. In the Victorian mind, smell equaled disease. The miasma theory taught that foul air carried illness. When the air smelled fresh, Londoners believed themselves safe. What they could not know was that the new pipes, designed to carry waste away, were instead channeling invisible toxins back into their homes. The gas seeped quietly through cracks, vents, and drains. It gathered in basements, bedrooms, and nurseries. And every night, as families slept beneath ceilings of polished plaster, the silent breath of death rose from below. Still, London grew prouder. Queen Victoria toured the Thames embankment, smiling at the engineering marvels that stretched before her. Politicians celebrated the cleansing of the capital. The press published triumphant headlines, "Science triumphs over pestilence." No one spoke of the strange madness afflicting entire families in Kensington and Bloomsbury. No one mentioned the children found lifeless in spotless bedrooms, their faces pale but peaceful, as if they had simply drifted into sleep. For the Victorians, progress was a religion, and to question it was heresy. Dr. Whitmore's growing obsession with the mysterious illness soon made him an outcast among his peers. When he presented his findings to the Royal College of Physicians, he was met with laughter and disdain. One senior official scoffed. "Surely, sir, you do not suggest that our city's salvation has become its own poison?" But Whitmore could not remain silent. He documented his patients' homes, the symptoms, the timeline. Everything pointed to one source, the new sewer connections. He even conducted simple experiments, lighting matches near drains and watching as faint, invisible flames flickered, a sign of escaping gas. Still, his warnings were ignored. His reputation crumbled. Patients abandoned his practice. He died in 1863, his notes confiscated by city officials, his work dismissed as unscientific hysteria. Ironically, it would take another generation for the truth he uncovered to be recognized. By the late 1860s, a handful of chemists began to suspect what Whitmore had died trying to prove. The gases leaking from the sewers, especially hydrogen sulfide and methane, were not merely unpleasant but neurologically toxic. They attacked the brain, causing confusion, memory loss, tremors, and eventually organ failure. But this new knowledge clashed violently with the dominant medical theory of the time. The Victorians believed in miasmas, foul air as the root of all disease. The idea that invisible, odorless gases could kill, even when the air smelled clean, was too radical to accept. So, the deaths continued. Quietly. Respectably. A city poisoned by its own ignorance, embalmed in its illusion of cleanliness. Nowhere was the suffering greater than in the industrial tenements. Families like the Hendersons and the Petons became the unseen victims of an invisible plague. Their landlords had proudly advertised modern sanitation, increasing rents for the privilege of having the newest technology. Yet, their tenants coughed, fainted, and forgot. Children grew slow and pale, their minds dulled by constant exposure to the gases that crept through their homes. And because the poor were always sick, always exhausted, their suffering drew little notice. Their deaths were recorded as unknown causes or nervous exhaustion. Progress had found its scapegoat, poverty itself. Then came the year 1865, when the river that had symbolized Britain's might turned against it. A mysterious epidemic swept through London. Thousands fell ill. Officials blamed cholera, though no one could explain why the disease struck clean neighborhoods more than filthy ones. The truth, as later investigations revealed, was horrifying. The same sewage pipes that carried waste away from homes were emptying directly into the Thames, the city's primary source of drinking water. The very water hailed as pure had become a reservoir of death. The irony was complete. London's war on disease had armed the. In time, reforms came, better ventilation, sealed pipes, cleaner water sources. But no monument was ever built for the victims of the sanitation disaster. No plaque names the forgotten thousands who perished in the cleanest homes in the world. And yet, their story endures, not in stone, but in warning. That progress, when unexamined, becomes peril. That the pursuit of purity without wisdom leads only to another kind of filth, the corruption of truth itself. Walk through London today, and you will still find the remnants of those Victorian sewers. They are the bones of an age that believed it had defeated nature, and in doing so, nearly destroyed itself. Engineers still marvel at their craftsmanship. By the summer of 1858, London reached a breaking point. The River Thames, once a source of life and commerce, had transformed into a viscous ribbon of decay. Newspapers called it the Great Stink. The stench was unbearable. It seeped through the walls of Parliament, forcing legislators to soak curtains in chloride of lime just to continue their sessions. People began to whisper that the end of civilization had come, not by war or famine, but by their own waste. Doctors warned of cholera's return. Mothers covered their children's noses as they passed the riverbanks. And merchants, once proud to work along the Thames, abandoned their warehouses altogether. But in this moment of despair, an unlikely hero emerged, Joseph Bazalgette, a soft-spoken engineer with a monumental vision. Bazalgette believed London could be saved, not by prayer or luck, but by engineering. He designed an intricate web of underground tunnels to carry the city's sewage far downstream, away from the drinking water. His plan was bold, expensive, and ridiculed by many. Yet he persisted, laying brick by brick beneath the heart of London. When the system was finally completed in the 1860s, the results were extraordinary. The death rates fell. The air cleared. The Thames began, slowly, to breathe again. But the scars remained, not just in the riverbanks, but in the city's collective memory. The Great Stink had shown how fragile London truly was, and how arrogance in the face of nature could nearly destroy an empire. The story of sanitation in Victorian London is not just a tale of dirt and disease, it is a mirror held up to humanity's pride. The Victorians believed they could build a city for millions without first respecting the laws of hygiene. They paved streets before purifying water. They constructed palaces while ignoring the cries of children dying from cholera in the slums. And yet, through tragedy, they learned. The Great Stink forced the powerful to smell what the poor had long endured. It bridged the gap between class and consequence, proving that filth, like fate, makes no distinction between rich and poor. Bazalgette's sewers became the veins of a new London, an underground marvel that still serves the city today. But beneath every brick lies a silent reminder, that progress born from neglect carries the scent of suffering. Victorian London's sanitation crisis was not just a public health disaster. It was a moral reckoning, a test of how long civilization could ignore its own reflection before being consumed by it. And so, when we walk along the quiet embankments of the Thames today, we tread over history's greatest contradiction, a city that nearly drowned in its own brilliance. For beneath the beauty of Victorian architecture lies a truth too powerful to forget. London was not saved by glory, but by grit. Not by kings or queens, but by the hands of engineers and the lessons of decay. This was how sanitation doomed Victorian London, and ultimately, how it redeemed it. And so, the tale of Victorian London reminds us that every empire carries the weight of its own creation, and that even the grandest cities can be undone by what lies beneath. If you found yourself drawn into this forgotten chapter of history, then journey with us again, here on Lyfory, where we breathe life into the echoes of the past, one story at a time. Because history never dies, it simply waits to be told. This is Lyfory, where every story lives forever.